known as the Ice Cube of Kinglake. I am joined, as always, with the talent, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am surviving the latest bout our city is having with the
Of Groundhog Day 3.0.
the unvogue virus of unspecified origins, which I had to be tested for this week. So I will apologize to our audience for being a bit sniffly. There might be some coughing, there might be some sneezing, there might be some blowing of the noses, but I assure you, you can't get the coronavirus.
We use plenty of antivirus software on this podcast.
Yeah,
safety first.
Doesn't come down the wire via the pipes that are the internet. And I have been given the test for the unspecified virus. And I was given the all clear by our top-notch people, which if we realize we're in our fourth wave, you can sort of figure out how top-notch they really are.
You should have just said, given the all clear by top men.
Top men, yes. I forgot. I missed that, though. Did you hear they're doing a fourth one of those films?
Yeah, and he's going to be like 80 when it comes out. That is just ridiculous. I don't know. I mean, it's being directed by James Mangold, who has generally made solid, if not great, movies. But really, just let it be a nice trilogy. That's all.
But the one thing that Disney doesn't know how to do is to let shit be.
That is fucking true.
But I am fine. I apologize for my voice and for any side effects. I will try to remember to mute where possible.
Better, man.
Or else it will be, of course, a less pleasant listening experience. Speaking of pleasant experiences, we have an exciting surprise coming up for you in a few weeks. Can't say too much about what it is, but do make sure you tune in next week for some more information.
Absolutely,
about the exciting, maybe addition to the show.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of thoughts.
Could be James Mangold for all you know.
Could be. It could be. Wow. Juan gets in there straight away.
Goes whack straight away with it.
Speaking of our chain movie of the week, which I chose following on from The Spanish Prisoner last week, we went to Hannibal. Got a bit of a stacked show. I'm not going to be talking too much about my stuff, but I did touch base on Clarice, the sort of like semi-sequel to Silence of the Lambs, the TV show, just to catch up on that. I watched the 1980 cult classic Battle Beyond the Stars, as well as going back to another classic movie, Dark City. And Travis went through and
classics myself, in fact.
Yeah, Breakfast Club, The Hidden, and don't know if it really qualifies as a classic, but it's a film, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
It's very much a film. You got that right.
Yes, I did my research on that one, and I made sure.
I'm fairly sure there was film involved in cameras and potentially a craft services truck.
Yes, I reckon so. And a lot of egos.
Yeah. You called it one. Oh, Dark City is the correct response. Yes,
well done. You win a prize, and that is our respect. Now, shall we get on with the show?
Let's crack on. We have a chock-a-block show. We'll try and get through it as quick as we can. So you chose Hannibal last week. 2001,
Ridley Scott directed revisiting of the legendary Hannibal Lecter by Anthony Hopkins.
This is, of course, the link here was David Mamet, who wrote the screenplay for this film and wrote and directed The Spanish Prisoner last week. This film was made, almost 10 years after the original?
Yeah.
I got this at a trivia night once. They're like, who was the actor who played Hannibal Lecter? And I'm like, oh, Brian Cox. And they're like, no, it was Hannibal Lecter. I'm like, no. Manhunter was made in 1986. It was directed by Michael Mann. And they're like, shut up, you're being a smart ass. And I'm like, if you don't have your answers right.
Exactly.
But anyway, from our perspective, the Hopkins version of Lecter started in 1990, I think it was
1990.
Silence of the Lambs. 1991.
I think it won the 91 Oscar, I think. So I think it came out in 1990.
But of course, we had to wait 10 years for the sequel. We get most of the team back.
Yep.
We get the important part, I guess, in some ways, in the sense of being Anthony Hopkins. But we have Frankie Faison as Nurse Barney coming back.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we do not have but missing link here, of course, is Jodie Foster, whose
Yeah.
role is replacing this played by Julianne Moore.
Julianne Moore. And this was at a point just before she really kind of hit it really hard. Thanks for the confirmation, Juan. It was 1994, Sons of the Lambs. It was really... This was just before, like, Julianne Moore was in sort of like The Hours, and then she had a slew of very big Oscar contention movies that really kind of knocked her up into this high grade position that she now still generally inhabits. It was a bit of a controversial one, and apparently one of the reasons why Jodie Foster chose not to come back was because of the way the book was. And I'm not going to spoil the book because I think that it is worthwhile.
I think we're going to have to spoil the book here. Because I mean, let's face it, the book's been out for 20 years.
That's fair. That's fair.
If you wanted to read the book that badly by now, you would have read it, and now we're telling you. So I think I have similar thoughts here, but you can proceed with what happens in the book.
So what happens in the book is there is far more of an obvious suggestion that Clarice Starling has perhaps embraced the teachings of Hannibal Lecter a little bit more than would necessarily be healthy. Like, she does participate in the meal at the end of the movie, and when you say a meal by Hannibal Lecter, you know that it's going to be human. And there's definitely a bit more of that overt kind of romance, I guess. They kind of flirt with it a little bit, and then they just skirt around it and just sort of like go, oh, he's actually... They do the cardinal sin of all good movie villains, and they turn him hero, essentially, in this movie, because he does a noble thing. It's like, yes, he's always been considered a noble character.
I'm going to stop you here for a second, because we've made a very rare mistake in the sense we actually haven't told anybody what the film's about yet.
That is true. That is true. So we've got a couple of options of synopses. So the first one from IMDb is: living in exile, Dr. Hannibal Lecter tries to reconnect with now disgraced FBI agent Clarice Starling and finds himself a target for revenge from a powerful victim. Guess that's accurate.
I think it does sum it up, I think, in a couple of sentences. I mean, the other one's quite a bit longer.
Yeah.
Which you'll probably get from talking about it. This film isn't good. I haven't seen this film. I haven't seen this film in probably 20 years, since it came out. And I guess they were always going to make a sequel, considering how successful the original was. This was the last film, I think, to sweep a bit before big Oscars, best actor, best actor, actress, director, picture. If I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it won 3, if not 4, of those awards. And it was obviously a huge part of the cultural zeitgeist. So it changed, serial killer films and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
But I was watching this film and I remember sort of thinking about halfway through. This film is just meandering along with doing very, very little. You called it messy, and I think that's a fine way to start. To sort of skip to our the bigger synopsis, the first half of the film, we're learning about the disgrace of Clarice Starling, which is done kind of poorly because she doesn't really do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It was kind of like almost like something you'd expect to see in an 80s cop movie, That's it, Mendoza, you're off the squad.
Yeah, it had that kind of feel, but through a very gritty lens. This was a point where Ridley Scott was kind of just exploring a little bit more of that gritty world kind of thing. He went on to do things like Body of Lies, which I think is possibly his worst movie, and that's saying a lot considering Prometheus. But it's like really so grounded that it's boring. And like the opening sequence to this movie is an attempted drug bust, and it should be cool, and it's kind of a cool setup, and it sort of goes through, and it's like, okay, this isn't too bad. This is kind of, oh well, that went to 11 very quickly. And it's over. Okay. and now she's being chastised for it when it was obviously not her fault. Okay, this is happening because reasons.
Because the script needs it to happen.
Yeah.
I was going to come in here and I was ready to stick the boots into to Ridley Scott here, because I think Ridley is a formerly great director who gets by on the seat of his pants on his reputation alone. I would argue I don't think he's made a decent film probably since The Martian in 2015 was pretty good.
It has been a long time.
All the Money in the World was pretty good, but he makes every good film he makes about 3 or 4 pretty bad ones. I mean, obviously, when you've got Blade Runner and Alien in your back catalog, you kind of get a little bit of wiggle room. Yeah, and then even like after this film, Body of Lies came 7 years after this, by the way. After this, he went straight into just as a Gladiator to Black Hawk Down, which is all right. Men, Maxic Men, Kingdom of Heaven, they're forgettable. All forgettable until Prometheus, which is not forgettable, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. But
don't worry, he's got Gladiator 2 on his dance card for the future.
I hope Russell Crowe's in that. But I was ready to come in here and just like swing away. Yeah, but I think Ridley. There's a story in the trivia here, but they came and asked him while he was filming Gladiator if he wanted to direct Hannibal, and he thought it was about Hannibal, the Roman general, or the Carthaginian, and he's like, no, I don't want to make another Roman film. He's like, no, sequel to Hannibal Lecter film. Like, oh yeah, no worries. Because who would have said no to that? Yeah, but he got handed a poison chalice because I think the problem with this is the script, and the problem with the script is the book. So. When you read about what Thomas Harris wrote, and I haven't read the book, I'll be fair, but the idea that your sequel to Silence of the Lambs would end with Hannibal Lecter forming a sexual relationship with Clarice is a horrible idea. It's a terrible idea, and like I don't care if you created the characters, it's just a shitty idea, and like so. Apparently, they shot 3 different endings of his film, or 3 different versions for Harris and for a couple other people involved in the production, and that's just not a good sign for a thing going forward. But I assume that he's kind of stuck to the story to a great degree here.
Overall, yeah.
So I mean, he has not got a screen running credit on his film. I would say we got Thomas Harris with a novel. We've got David Mamet and Steven Zalian for screenplay credit. We all know David Mamet from last week. Steven Zalian's a reasonably well-known writer. He wrote Schindler's List, The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. So he can do his thing. He wrote The Irishman. But this is, I just think they had nothing to work with. I think they were working from an incredibly weak basis in terms of that novel being just horrible thing to base it off. But the first half of the film with Anthony Hopkins is all around him living in Naples or something, Florence. Florence. And a bit of a cat and mouse game with a local police officer trying to catch him and hand him in for a reward. That should have been done in 10 minutes.
Well, the thing is, it's particularly hard to come back to this movie after the success, certainly the critical success and the cult success of the Brian Fuller created TV series with Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal, because they reutilize a lot of this stuff. Like, for some weird contractual reason, they weren't allowed to have Clarice Starling involved. But they were able to have Will Graham, who was the FBI agent we follow in Red Dragon, which is the prequel to Silence of the Lambs. Allowed to use Hannibal Lecter, allowed to use characters like Dr. Chilton and the Verger family and things like that, the Tooth Fairy and all of that stuff.
It's weird, isn't it? Because it's obviously the same thing in Clarice. They can't mention Hannibal Lecter in that TV show, so somehow those rights have been.
It's a weird split. It's a weird split. But what they did in the TV show is they created a separate character in Gillian Anderson's character. She's fucking phenomenal. She's been kicking goals for a long time now. But she ends up kind of going into this weird kind of almost Stockholm syndrome relationship with Hannibal Lecter, knowing what he is, living in Europe and kind of being held hostage, but at the same time still being a bit of an enabler and things like that. And it was a really well played, interesting dynamic. So going back to watching this, it's like, oh no, this is just really, this is slow. This is plodding along for no reason when you could just get to the crux of the matter. And the thing that made Silence of the Lambs really memorable, at least for me, was the relationship and the chemistry between Clarice and Hannibal. And it takes so long to get them together. And even then, it feels kind of weird and stunted and just bizarre.
You're right. It doesn't mean Julianne Moore does the best she can with a role that is a thankless task. I mean, it's an iconic role for Jodie Foster. And apparently they were pissed that Jodie Foster didn't come back. Jodie made the right call.
I think so.
You're right, and it was the cat and mouse. It was the interplay, those scenes with Hannibal Lecter in his cell behind the perspex, and profiling, Clarice, and then once he escaped, again a little bit of that cat and mouse game between Clarice and Hannibal. But you're right; it takes way too long to get them into the same room. And then, as you said, it kind of it just doesn't work. Hannibal, the character, doesn't work in this film. Like I said, for me, I really didn't like the section of him in Florence. Why are we halfway through the film? Like, I remembered this stuff from when I watched it last, and watching it in here, and I'm like, why are we still in fucking Florence? I don't care about this story. I don't care about the police officer. It was his name, Patsy. I don't care about why Hannibal Lecter's become an art expert or something while he lives there. Like, I don't care. And it's not a bad way to sort of start off and go, actually, he's been hiding out in Europe in plain sight. He's a lecturer. Again, 20 minutes is what that section needed to maybe, but also at the same time, Hannibal has turned into some sort of fucking Michael Myers type character. Like, he's like, he's like a slasher killer now. Like, he's able to take down dudes who are professionals trying to track him down. I assume these are paid thugs to basically come and bring him back home to the.
That's it. It's
trying to paint. He's just trying to kill them. He's able to, do like slasher kills where like they're looking for him, but he sees them, but they don't see him. He's like, he may be a very intelligent man and a very efficient serial killer, but a serial killer is not. Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, right? Like, they're
monsters.
And it's basically he's able to be he's not also a tactical expert, right? He's a psychiatrist.
No. He's a manipulator. He plays people against each other, and this movie kind of goes, oh no, we need to see him getting the body count in, because he's this legendary mass murderer, and we've never seen him kill anyone until the end of Silence of the Lambs, where he breaks out of prisons, which is perfect because he has been a tiger in a cage that whole movie, and he saw an opportunity and he took it, and that's when you saw the lion. This was like, I'm sorry, the whole notion, there's like that bit where Mason Verger's like, Cornell, does that look like a wave goodbye or hello? And it's like, Hannibal Lecter's an intelligent man. He's on the run. He would not purposefully get attention like that. Come on. He is a smart guy. The deed would have been enough.
And in the fact, he was actually a very highly populated tourist area. You could see it with tourists on the street and stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea that he would put himself at that kind of risk just seemed completely out of character, just to send a statement. Now, obviously, statement killings are kind of his jam, but to put himself at such high risk to do it, I mean,
no,
it didn't seem in character with him, and the way it seemed out of character. He's a different Hannibal Lecter this time, and if I imagine a Hannibal Lecter who's been in hiding for 10 years would be very good at hiding. So that whole segment in Florence slows the film down to an absolute crawl. And again, I haven't read the book, but I have to imagine this comes from the source text.
Yeah.
So you can't get too far. Maybe you can tweak the ending a bit. And even then, Ridley Scott apparently had to ask permission of Thomas Harris if he was okay with him changing the ending. And he said, yeah. So this is a shitty story at Derlin Device. I mean, let's going to set the whole thing in Florence. And we should be kind of stupid because the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction there. So that was weird. Mason Verger, is that his name? Gary Oldman's character is kind of an interesting ace in the hole character here. He's kind of he's doing his own manipulation of things, and at one point he manipulates Ray Liotta to put Clarice Starling in...
Not Crandler, Ray Liotta. He manipulates the man, Ray Liotta.
I couldn't remember his character's name.
I know. I'm Yankee Jack.
Was there someone else played Paul Crandler in your first film, didn't he? He was a character in... Silence of the Lambs, I think, but I don't remember the name. But
he's... And it's a weird... It's really, really weird. Again, going back to having watched Clarice, which is follow-on from... It follows on the story for Clarice's character from Silence of the Lambs. She works for Paul Crandler in that series. And it's kind of an antagonistic mentor-mentee kind of relationship that they're developing in the show. And it's like, okay, I don't know where they're getting their source material from, or they're just gone, yeah, we're literally just going to use that character and that's it. And we'll create our own thing. I think that's what they're doing, because it's weird kind of looking at it. So like, oh, this is an alternate reality version, perhaps, where things are different. I don't know. I didn't like any of the Paul Crandler stuff.
It felt out of place in his film. It felt like, these political machinations.
Yeah.
And back office deals. It felt like something out of the X-Files. Like, remember, there's always that wheeling and dealing angle to the guys in the X-Files, or something maybe from a film about, political machinations or something like that. But it also felt cliche. In a way that nothing in Silence of the Lambs did.
I kind of wonder if part of that was accidentally intentional, because in every single scene where Clarice is being dressed down, she is in a sea of men. She's the only woman, and I'm wondering if it's a bit of that kind of like, oh, we're putting a little bit of social context into this movie, but we're not doing it at all well. And
I noticed it as well. Yeah, I think it was a clumsy attempt to replicate what they did so perfectly in the first film. Is that scene where she's in the elevator with all the huge FBI guys, right?
Yep.
Or the scene where she's at the autopsy or whatever, and they're like, and she says later, people watch you, see how you behave matters, and it's really softly spoken and understated. That played perfectly. Whereas this is like, she's a woman surrounded by men.
It's so over. It's
clumsy.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see what they were trying to do that in 2001, which you'd kind of expect it to be very much in your face today, because that's just kind of the fashion for filmmaking now, is to insert social messages in a clumsy way. But, in 2001, they were doing it as well. So Leota's character, it didn't do anything for me. Oldman is good, I guess, as Mason Verger. I don't... Yeah, I mean, the character's probably a fairly dislikable person. It's kind of... A makeup is kind of pretty full on, I guess.
Well, it's technically an uncredited role for Gary Oldman. Yeah,
it was some sort of weird credited thing. You read in the trivia, you can find a story about whether or not it was because Gary Oldman was being a douchebag and demanding equal billing, or whether it was something else at play. You can make up your own mind on that one, I suppose. I thought it was a strange place to open the film. The film opened with Mason Verger negotiating to buy Hannibal Lecter's face mask from Barney. I'm like, is that where you want to open the film, though? You're opening a film with a character we don't know.
I kind of appreciated it, because it's attempting to set Mason Verger up as the grand architect of evil for the movie, the big bad, where Hannibal Lecter the character is able to, be portrayed more as an anti-hero and not an all-out villain, because no one in the early 2000s was willing to go, yeah, we're going to make a villain movie. It was not at all the trend. It was not the money maker that it is today. So they needed
crazy idea, because it didn't really work.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the fact that you've got the greatest villain of all time, one of them, and you're going to go turn him into, kind of a pawn in someone else's chess game. It was ridiculous. I thought the violence in this as well. This is pretty gruesome in parts, and overtly gory violence. Which I was thinking back to Silence of the Lambs for a film with again, one of the greatest serial killer characters in history.
Two, I think the Tooth Fairy is pretty fucking cool.
Buffalo Bill, you mean?
Buffalo Bill.
But it's not a lot of overt violence. There's a couple of gruesome scenes. There's a couple of gruesome scenes where they pull the girl's body out of a river and she can see the diamond cuts in her back. It's pretty gruesome. She pulls the Benjamin Raspel's head in the jar. So there are a couple of simple, gory-ish, scary jump scare scenes and gross out scenes, but there's not a lot of anybody stabbing anybody. There's no one hanging anybody off a balcony by their bowels or something.
Exactly. This is that gratuitous violence, and just let's throw all of the gore as we can. And it's the worse for it. If it was suggested, if they had kind of gone, all right, you know what, we're going back to the Florence scene where the Sardinian guys or wherever they're from come in and they're trying to catch him. If it had just been silence for a moment, and maybe that interaction where you see Patsy kind of tied up and he has a call with Clarice, then it's like ta-ta, hangs up, then the next thing you see is him just walking away from the scene, people screaming, you just see a body just hanging from the window.
Or the shadow. Remember there was a scene of the shadow against the wall. You can see the
shadow
of him.
Had more than enough. They force feed you this context. It's like, oh yes, your ancestor was hung from this very window, blah 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 blah. So like, okay, that's what's going to happen to that guy then. You didn't need to show it. You had preluded it to the extreme, and just Hannibal Lecter walking away comfortably, maybe cleaning a knife, and just leave it at that. So like, fuck, those people ran in and he walked out. Okay, that's cool. Show it.
And then right through to the end, the final scene or the final sequence, the dinner scene you referenced earlier, is one of the more disturbing scenes I've seen in a mainstream film. And that would be fine in the right context of a film where that maybe a Saw film. I don't know, you kind of you go to a Saw film, you expect gory violence. And you it's kind of horror porny. So you kind of get that. Maybe in a Tarantino film, maybe you could be almost played for laughs. But in this film, it doesn't seem to fit.
No.
But it fits in the back. It fits with this film because there's a lot of violence and gory, gruesome killing in this. And people's throats being cut and blood spurting out everywhere. I don't know why they put that in there. Like, is it in there because really you looked at the script and gone, there's not enough on the page here to make this interesting? I need to put in some action and violence and blood and gore to make it a little bit more appealing to people. I don't know. It just I found myself really looking back, going, is it Jonathan or is it Ted Demme who directed the original? It might have been Ted. I think.
Ted.
And like he had such beautiful restraint for that first film.
I think the subtlety of Silence of the Lambs is the biggest problem that this movie does not have. Does have, sorry. And that is that everything is so kind of blunderbuss shot at the wall and see what sticks. Like, it's kind of a cool way to introduce Clarice Starling, of her being the only person asleep in this SWAT van for back of anything. So like, okay, she's seen some shit. She knows how to stay on point when the moment comes. That's cool. And in the book, they do go into more of the psychological effect that her time interviewing and talking with Hannibal Lecter has affected her and how it has molded her and shaped her. But they don't do any of that here. They have a throwaway line where he says, she's talking to unnamed intern or something like that. Like, oh, do you ever think about him? And she says, oh, at least 30 seconds of every day. It's like, okay, that's all you're going to do about the effects of Hannibal Lecter on someone? Come on. We're seeing these huge character changes, like the fact that she starts shouting as like, swear me, you swear too. Like, she wasn't at all like that in Silence of the Lambs, and time changes people. That's understandable, but give us a little bit more as to why she's like that. Where did she get that confidence from? Is it because of Hannibal Lecter? If so, then give us the little bits of narrative to explain that.
Yeah, you're right, and you could have spent quite a bit of time, an interesting time, on making the PTSD, of someone who had to endure like the final sequence within Buffalo Bill's basement.
Yeah, that's what Clarice, the series, does to its credit. It very much goes into that and the formative psychological ramifications of that single couple of weeks in her life and dealing with Hannibal Lecter and dealing with Buffalo Bill. That was really well done. And obviously they're given a lot more time in a series to explore that, but they had oodles of time in this movie that they spent on other unnecessary things that they could have done to really flesh out the character of Clarice Starling, because she seems very hollow overall, I think.
So, I mean, it's not unusual, I guess, for a great film to have a deeply unsatisfying sequel. I think this film has been treated very generously. It has a 6.8 on IMDb. It has a 57 on Metacritic. I think both are too high. It's not a woeful, unwatchable mess of a film. It's just slow. It's self-indulgent. It's boring. It's too violent for what it needs to be. It's too long for what it needs to be, and it squanders its greatest asset. And it also, one of the things, it stretches credulity for me. So there was a scene where we actually saw Hannibal was part of a 10 most wanted men in the world on the FBI most wanted list, and yet he's able to fly. Not disguised, no disguises. Just like you see him at the end. He's on a plane sharing food with a kid, and he's not wearing a mask. He's not wearing sunglasses. He's just
you see, the thing is, on that 10 most wanted list, it's got his picture and it says it just says 2 hands. So like, oh, it's clearly not him then.
I imagine they might have found the hand at the at the house and updated the listing on the internet. I mean, it's kind of ironic. This came out in February 2001, so we know what happened in 2001 when it came to aeronautic events. So if this had come out February 2002, maybe it might have been significantly less believable that like someone who's on the 10 most wanted list could get on a plane in the United States and fly internationally. I mean, I assume he has a fake passport or something. I mean, that's an interesting trick. But I just found out he did it multiple times because he was in Florence, then he was in the States, and then at the end we see him flying somewhere again, to escaping the United States on a plane. Like, come on, guys. Like, he's a pretty recognizable dude. And can you imagine, just imagine for a second, the story if it had been found that he actually had killed a really, really super rich dude, Mason Verger, at his house, multiple people. He killed multiple people at that house, including an FBI agent and a guy rich enough to rent a senator. That might have been pretty big news. And like, they might have been going, well, what's he going to do? He's going to do, well, he probably won't try and fly anywhere. No one does that. So, pictures of him at the airport. And like, I know maybe I'm just going too deep, and maybe in a better film I would have gone, yeah, no worries, whatever. But like, you need, like, it just didn't make sense to me that one of the most wanted men in the world would just be able to get on a plane without any particular efforts to disguise himself.
Yeah, given the legacy of the movie, given the quality of the cast involved, given the heritage of the director and the writer, the problems that we're picking, they shouldn't really be problems if people were trying. That's the thing. It feels like either there were too many egos in the room and nothing got done, or they just thought, yeah, let's kind of cash in. And it apparently Thomas Harris, the writer of the Hannibal Lecter books, he ended up writing a prequel to all of this called Hannibal Rising because of some loophole, he was going to lose the rights to his own character if he didn't write another book. And they wanted to do a prequel movie. And so he said, well, look, I'll write it. At least that'll be done. So I'm like, okay. Phew, the enthusiasm from this guy to continue his character. I think it died halfway through the book of Hannibal. Yeah, money,
you know
money,
what I
money.
mean? Money. Apparently, according to the trivia on IMDb, the screenplay was rewritten 15 times because Demi and Foster were unhappy with the new character amounts in the end and never remained for production. So who knows how many times it happened again after they left the production. It was a disappointing film. I was I actually liked it a lot less this time than the last one.
Yeah, I remember it being a bit disappointing when I saw it the last time, which is probably about 15 years ago, maybe. But coming back to it now after the success of Hannibal, which I really enjoyed, the TV show, as well as the generally good Clarice, this just really feels bad. Really does.
The only thing I can say it would have been interesting is that, again, according to the IMDb trivia, take it for a grain of salt, but at one point, David Fincher was down to direct this. Now, that I might have been interested in seeing.
That would have been interesting for sure.
You imagine sort of filtering Silence of the Lambs through 7. That
would have been good.
That dark, gritty, terrifying
tone. Again, it has more of the violence or the visual violence, because you, like 7, you do see the kills, but you don't see it's not blood slicing from someone's throat and things like that. It is all purposely designed to tweak the character's tense difficulty up and up and up and up and up to a breaking point where the finale is fantastic. And that's
the consequence of that violence, right? What's in the box?
Yeah.
You never really actually see what's in the box.
No.
But yeah, it's it would have been interesting to see. I almost certainly think you wouldn't have been allowed to make the film his way, so maybe it's a good thing. But I think David Fincher might have been a better choice of Ridley Scott. But
I think so.
He's just been a little bit comfortable the last 30 years.
Whoops. He has been going for a very long time, so I think it's fair that he's kind of gone into active retirement.
maybe he should have gone a Tarantino route. Tarantino's 10 and out. But who knows? But then we wouldn't get Gladiator 2. So
now the keys are in your hands, sir. Where are you taking us?
I have been preparing for this. There's so many exits from this. It's such a high-profile cast. And I'm going to take one of the more obvious routes, but I'm going to take us to a slightly less obvious locale. And we are going back to 1986. And we are following Gary Oldman to Sid and Nancy.
Ooh, Sid and Nancy. It's been a long time since I saw that.
I've never seen this film before. So, but it might be a little bit trickier for you to get out of because there are no massively huge names here. But I did. Yeah, I'm sure. I have confidence. If nothing else, if we're in a situation of break glass in case of emergency, and you have Xander Berkeley in this film, and Xander Berkeley has been in everything.
He was also in Poison Ivy 2 that I had to watch as penance for not completing the chain movie task last time.
I just was going to say he was also in Barbed Wire, if you're so inclined.
Oh Jesus! Oh.
So this film is a little bit tricky to find. Oh no, should know. Courtney Love is in the film also, so she's been in a couple of really decent, interesting films. If you get stuck,
yeah, I'll find a way out.
You'll find a way out. Yeah, I have confidence, but this is I'm really trying to make an effort rather than going, oh, I want to see The Fifth Element again. You know, you can sit here and listen to us jerk off about how great this Fifth Element is, but a film that George hasn't seen in a long time, and a film I've never seen.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see it. It's a little tricky to find in Australia because apparently the people who own the rights to these things don't like money. So I have acquired a copy in advance. So which I will get you to get you.
We talked to the producers. You know, when you're as high profile as us, when
you got 3,000 followers, they send over the print, and I'll be screening it in my theater room.
Yeah.
Also known as a living room. But no, I will give you. I will make sure you get a copy, so you're able to obtain it.
Fantastic, thank you. That is why he is called the talent, ladies and gentlemen. He knows people.
But also, sometimes you just need to prepare.
That is true. Now then, shall we move on? I want to just do a quick sidestep, if you will, into Clarice, just because I have caught up with the show. It did go on a bit of a hiatus because of COVIDs. So I'll just quickly give my updates on it. I'm still actually enjoying it. It is very much a slow burn kind of show. But the fact that, like I teased during the Hannibal section, it does go into the effects and ramifications of Clarice's life. And not only does it talk about her time with Buffalo Bill, and one of the key characters in the series is actually the senator's daughter, who was the last attempted victim of Buffalo Bill, and how that scenario affected her as well. But it does also go into more of that little bit of tease that we got with have the lambs stopped crying, Clarice? That kind of backstory, that the deep childhood trauma that Clarice suffered, and how that is all forming and mutating her as an FBI agent going forward. Still don't know about the overall story. It's a little bit kind of villain of the week-ish, but there is consistently this peppering of overarching story through it. Maybe not quite enough. We'll see how it culminates at the end of the season, but it seems to have an idea of where it wants to go, and it seems to be actually doing quite well for it. So I'm enjoying it. And if you want something that's a slow burn, like it's not one that you'd want to smash through and just binge watch, one episode a week, the way that it is being released, is absolutely the way to watch this. Just every now and then, just like 15 minutes of psychological profiling, not in the same way as something like Mindhunters, but it's got a bit more of that kind of attitude, and certainly more to The Silence of the Lambs than Hannibal as a movie was, that's for sure. And it's borrowing a little style-wise from Silence of the Lambs, but also from the Brian Fuller Hannibal series. There's a lot more kind of beauty to the violence in a weird way. It is shot, the cinematography of the show is really, really quite lovely. So if you want something that's technically very good and technically an interesting narrative story, I do recommend it. I do. But
where I struggle with it is I thought the actress who was playing Clarice was just not very good, and
she is kind of weak.
And considering it was such a good role for Jodie Foster, and I love the original film so much, and it's like, sorry, can't. I don't know how good. I don't care how good everyone else is in this. You're not. It felt cheap. The acting felt cheap. You're right. It's shot on It's shot on location well, and you can unlike something like what was that Jupiter show we watched the other week?
Jupiter's Legacy, yeah.
And that feels super cheap, nasty. It doesn't look like But anyway, it's interesting if you're a really big fan.
Yeah,
check it out,
absolutely.
you know.
I would definitely consider myself a Hannibal Lecter Thomas Harris fan. I've read all the books except for Hannibal Rising because I saw the movie first and it's like, oh no, this is just all kinds of bad. Nope, I'm just gonna like Indiana Jones. It should have just stopped at 3. But you know, that's just my quick little update on Clarice. Yeah. What do you want to talk about next?
Well, I can quickly pivot and talk about. Well, actually, I think consider we're about 40 minutes in, maybe a bit more. It might be time to hear from
our sponsors. Yes, absolutely. This week's episode is brought to you by UK.
But it's from July 1988 is our sponsor. The month of July, all of it. How old were you in 1988?
1988, I was 5.
5. So you're probably not going to recognize any of the ads, but
hopefully I'll remember some of the products at least.
Hopefully we'll see, and we'll try and remember to share the audio this week.
Yeah.
Okie dokies.
Right. Here we go. And that coming in there.
A quiet drink, and then anything goes as Paul Barnes steps out along the South Downs Way with occasional diversions en route, like this small zoo where a family of lively apes give pause for reflection. Then we travel north with Fam Roads to meet another furry friend in an exhibition devoted to Sooty & Co. with entertainment guaranteed. Another chance to see Anything Goes, Monday at 6:30 on Anglia.
Good morning, Bob. Here we go.
Kevin, where exactly did you bury the car?
In the sand. I'm not helping much, am I, Dad?
No, but I know a man who can.
AA 5-star. Motoring abroad. We're all you need to know.
Yes, it could well have sand in the engine, yes.
Mrs. Jones knows what's going on in the world, but she never reads a newspaper. So what has she got that other people don't have? Oracle Teletext. It gives you the edge.
On Anglia, Wednesday at 11:05, a cult encounter with the Killers. He's fast. She's faster. And they're speeding headlong into a very special, very dangerous deal.
There's something coming up, maybe a spot for a good driver.
I'm always interested in a good job.
Sit right there. Mickey, you will tell us everything.
Okay, Flash. Show me what you can do.
Ronald Reagan, the man with the master plan.
It's dangerous.
No, I don't understand.
Would $100,000 make you understand?
John Cassavetes and Angie Dickinson meet The Killers. A cult encounter Wednesday at 11:05 on Anglia.
After a weekend in the country, Fran and Jack make a big decision. A prize-winning short film from Australia, Feathers, shortly over on Channel 4.
Australia,
yeah. All right, that's it for our sponsors for this week.
I have a feeling that the Australian commercials are a little bit more fun.
They're so formal, the British ones.
Yeah.
I do remember Oracle Teletext though. That was something that
high tech bizarro.
Yeah. I remember when it was amazing when they started getting games on your TV.
I know that they did that in the UK. I heard in the UK, you could actually download games, or you could record games off a radio.
That's witchcraft. I don't know what that is.
You know how like we used to have cassette tapes?
Yeah.
And you could they would play the code shit over the radio, and you record on your cassette tape.
That's
just
witchcraft. Nope.
I think it was the UK that did that. But I know we had the same thing here. It was called teletext or teletype or something, and it was like I guess very, very early internets.
Sort of like digital TV guide sort of thing. It's like
it'd be like news and stuff like that, news and weather and stock prices and stuff, and you're like, that's all people will ever want to know, isn't it?
Yes, and it was always so badly written. Like there were just so many spelling mistakes, and particularly names of international places. It's like, oh, they didn't do any research on that. That's just someone was given a bit of information to type up.
They gave it to the intern.
This is my first summer job.
You've probably never used a computer before. You learn to type like me on a typewriter. Yes, I did learn to type on a typewriter. So do not hold it against me. I'm old. Should we move on? Let's talk about The Hidden. So I've had a complete flashback fortnight here, and I was actually going to talk about this last week, but it was such a short block show. I decided to hold it over, but I did not want to skip this because this is really, really, really good stuff. So Hidden was made in 1987. It is a horror sci-fi thriller. Probably the only notable star in here is Kyle MacLachlan.
Claudia Christiansen is in there. She was Commander Susan Ivanova from Babylon 5. Shut up. And she played Helga. And she was Helga, the sexy sidekick of the big bad guy in Atlantis, the Disney movie that kind of killed them for a while in the 2D animation. But anyway.
I had never heard of her before, but yes, I noticed that she was in a trivia after this. She popped up to be a bit of a cult star. I guess the protagonist of the film is a guy called played by an actor called Michael Nori.
Okay.
Nari or Nori, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. He was in Flashdance before this. Now he was apparently he turned down the role of Martin Riggs in a little film called Lethal Weapon to do this film. Now, of course, we all know you probably never heard of Lethal Weapon. It's an obscure film that no one's ever seen, and started just nobody got the role called Mel Gibson, who never went on to do anything else of interest. No. There was only the one film, I think, of Lethal Weapon. Certainly went 3 sequels. And the fact that no one's ever heard of The Hidden. Let's put that context that decision into context. He plays a character called Tom Beck. So The Hidden is about a cop and an FBI agent race for answers after law-abiding people suddenly become violent criminals, which is a very sanitized version of what's actually happening. We see at the start of a film a guy rob a bank in very violent fashion, and then jump into a Ferrari and then lead the police on a pretty epic car chase across LA. I felt like I was watching a car chase in Grand Theft Auto because it felt like it. But and then he basically tries to run the cops down. He crashes his car. They shoot him, and he goes to hospital where he's somehow survived being shot by 50 different cops. And sort of thinking, this is a really interesting angle. So it's a very, very violent start to the film, but it's a really exciting start to the film. And bit of a spoiler here. So if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, skip ahead a little bit. But this is revealed pretty early in the film.
Okay.
It's not on YouTube. You can
rent it on YouTube.
Okay, sorry. I had to rent it elsewhere because reasons. Rent. And we find out that basically there is an alien or alien slug thing loose in LA. And it's basically going from, it's a little bit alienish in the sense that it comes out of this guy's who's been shot's mouth because his body is now dying.
Okay.
And it goes into the body of a guy who's a cancer patient in the bed next to him, and turns this person who was a. But the thing is, it doesn't really slow his thing down very much. Like, it basically can't be killed by conventional weapons. He does sort of tend to wear the body out fairly quickly, though, because it lives a fast lifestyle. It's a bit rock and roll. But
every character after the parasite has left them is just played by Keith Richards
or Tommy Lee. You see, Sebastian Stan's going to play Tommy Lee.
And Lily Cole.
And I've seen the pictures of her as Pamela Anderson, and like, wow, she really looks like her. I'm interested in that. But anyway, so Tommy Lee is not in this film. But basically, it occupies these people and turns them into, amoral killers.
Okay.
With a penchant for committing crimes, doing whatever the fuck it wants, and driving Ferraris and shit. And Michael Nouri plays the local sort of highly respected detective. He's on the case. He's been hunting down the first guy who robbed the bank for ages. And he's joined shortly after by Kyle MacLachlan, who sort of arrives as after the alien occupies a second host. It goes and basically beats the shit and kills a record store in it. Record stores, if you're not sure, kids. Let me tell you about record stores. He was shoplifting cassettes. That was what he was doing.
That's a worthy thing. They only ever appreciate and value.
And he basically kills him because of it. But Kyle MacLachlan is at the scene of his crime. He plays an FBI agent from Seattle, and I've been tracking these guys. But there's something a little off about Kyle MacLachlan. He's just a funny guy. His story doesn't quite seem to add up, but he basically joins up with Michael Nouri to try and hunt down this what they don't know is a creature yet, but to sort of end its reign of terror across LA, and later in the film to actually to short circuit some of its pretty nefarious plans. I don't want to give too much away about what happens later, because I would strongly recommend you find this film.
Okay.
Do you ever see a film in the 80s called Alien Nation?
Yeah.
It was sort of a buddy cop film, but it had aliens in it.
Yeah.
A little bit more like it's sort of. This is actually predates Alien Nation by a year or two, I think.
Okay.
But it's got a sort of more vibe. So it has sort of a buddy cop angle, but with a sci-fi edge.
Okay.
Sci-fi horror edge to it, which is an interesting sort of combination of genres, and it's done really well. It's really entertaining. It's really fun. It's got that great 80s aesthetic of everyone's got Uzis and shit. Like I said, the suits, their hair, it's got that 80s action film edge they just can't seem to get right anymore. It's fun and it's violent. But we were just complaining about a film being too violent, but this is violent in the right way, in the sense it fits with the aesthetic. Some of the effects are really gross, which is kind of what you want from it. It's kind of trashy movie, It's directed by a guy named called Jack Scholler, whose name doesn't ring a bell to me. I was
just looking at his filmography, and it's sort of like,
he did A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and he did A Wishmaster in 1999. Holy shit! Wait. Oh, he did Mortal Kombat Conquest. Oh, yeah, everyone should forget about that.
The writer is written by Jim Koof or Jim Koof. I don't know how you pronounce that. He has done some other. He wrote Rush Hour. He wrote National Treasure. He was a producer on Grimm.
Okay. He was a writer on the remake of Taxi. That's bad.
That wasn't great. Yeah. Well, he wrote Operation Dumbo Drop, so that all just sort of, just
there we go.
It all out. This is a fun movie. I really, really enjoyed this. If you like a bit of horror, a bit of sci-fi, I can't recommend The Hidden. If I could tell you the story about how I discovered this, it's somebody posted a picture on a group I'm in on Facebook of a TV guide from Melbourne in like 1989 or something like that. And I was like, I don't remember what was interesting about it, but they decided it was worth posting. But I was just sort of looking and going, what was on TV that night? And, The Hidden was on at like 11 o'clock at night or something. I'm like, never heard of that one. I'm going to have a look at it. I found it, and I'm very glad very, very glad I watched it, because this is a hidden treasure.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. And, I love Carl McLaughlin. I think he's a great actor, so I'm always happy to watch his work. Cool. All right. Where should we go to next?
Do you want? Well, we're talking science fiction.
Yeah, should I go to?
Do you want to talk about Dark City?
Yeah. So Dark City. It's a romantic comedy. No, it's one of the classic. It came out a year before The Matrix, and I'd be curious. Actually, could you, while I'm talking, Travis, could you look up and see when The 13th Floor came out? Was that?
I think that was 1999. We saw that. We watched that.
Yeah, we watched that because there was like this 3 or 4 year 99. So this came out before The 13th Floor, which we talked about months ago now on the show, and The Matrix, which we've talked about in the past as well, I believe. This is kind of playing in a similar vein as those sorts of things, with sort of like reality is not what you think it is, and this is a hyper stylized kind of movie directed by Alex Proyas, who has had some on and off successes. Like, he really got a lot of success for The Crow, the original one. He did this a couple of years later, but he has also done Knowing and Gods of Egypt most recently. So he's a bit of a touch and go guy. He did do iRobot, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly great. But it's got quite a cool cast in it as well. It's got Rufus Sewell, Kiefer Sutherland, Jennifer Connelly, William Hurt, Richard O'Brien, Ian Richardson, and Bruce Spence, to name some of the most...
Melissa George in her film debut.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very small role, but she's in it.
But yes.
Colin Friels, who our Australian listeners will know Colin Friels. He was in Water Rats. He's been in everything, Colin Friels. You will absolutely know Colin Friels' face.
Yeah.
But, this was filmed in Sydney.
Yeah,
again,
it was.
Exactly where The Matrix is filmed, but a year before it. Yeah.
And even like stylistically, there's that similarity to it. Like, this is, this movie is a great prototype for me for what if they decided to do like a modern day live action version of Batman the Animated Series, with that kind of like Art Deco aesthetic, kind of what Tim Burton played with a little bit in his Batmans. But this is that time out of place. It's very old school, like 50s, 60s, 70s kind of atmosphere around, but it doesn't feel like that's the right time frame. It feels like that's the time that they set up, much like the next year, The Matrix, they kind of say, oh, we set it up as this year. This is the most kind of accessible time, or the most understandable time for people to accept, and things like that. It's a really cool little idea. For those who don't know, the plot of Dark City is a man struggles with memories of his past, which include a wife he can't remember and a nightmarish world no one else ever seems to wake up from. I don't know if that's really true. Let's try it. Written by Anonymous. John Murdoch, that's Rufus Sewell's character, awakens alone in a strange hotel to find that he has lost his memory and is wanted for a series of brutal and bizarre murders. Whilst trying to piece together his past, he stumbles upon a fiendish underworld controlled by a group of beings known as the Strangers, who possess the ability to put people to sleep and alter the city and its inhabitants. Now Murdoch must find a way to stop them before they take control of his mind and destroy him. I think that's a little bit more of a better...
It is. It is a fairly intricate plot.
Yes, it really, really is. This is not one that you can just have on in the background and just casually jump in and out of the story.
I would strongly recommend paying attention to it because it's worth it.
Absolutely agree. And I think it's, looking at the scores, 7.6 IMDb and 66 on Metacritic. I think that's really harsh. I think this is actually worth it. It's dated, especially compared to how well the visuals of The Matrix have held up. Only 1 year apart, this does look more dated. The special effects and things like that are not as good, but the story is still incredibly solid. The performances are still great. Kiefer Sutherland, he was just fantastic as Dr. Daniel Schreiber, who's the only other person in this world who knows what's really going on. And there's just a great little scene where he's kind of in his laboratory setting up these syringes that the strangers use to inject new memories into people. It's just so great the way he plays it. It's just the right side of mad scientist, where he's kind of like childlike delight about sort of like putting a little bit of childhood trauma and things like that, just dropping these bits into it to make these great memories, this great like holistic memory bank for a new character in the world that he's helping build. The strangers themselves are delightfully, they have been so mined over the years for the look, the way that they deal with everything, and particularly thinking about like there's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer which is all silent, and like the characters are kind of like the whispers, and they just kind of float through and just do things. It's like, okay, that's very much like the strangers. And the Matrix, even the council of the strangers and things like that, it feels very agent-y. There's a lot of iconic kind of look to this movie. I really, really enjoy it. I would love to actually see a TV show of this.
I
mini
absolutely thoroughly disagree, because you know they'd fuck it up.
No, if they got the right people, I think that there is more than enough to mine for kind of where the strangers came from, how they set things up, and why they are searching for the meaning of the soul. It's a throwaway line, but it's sort of like, oh, okay, that's why they're doing it. They're experimenting to find out this. That's why they created the memories of a serial killer and things like that. They're pushing the limits and stuff like that. I think there's enough there, and to be able to have, I'm a sucker for those kind of stories where you can have the same actors just playing different roles, and the fact that you can just, so like this week, this person has been injected with the mind of someone who is a flamboyant skydiver. It's one of the things that I really just loved about Quantum Leap. It's just one of those tools that I enjoy.
I hear you, but I disagree with you. One thing I hate about everything today in entertainment is everything needs a backstory. Nobody wanted a Cruella de Vil film. Fucking no one, but they made it anyway. Now MGM have a rights, as you called it last week, by the way.
Thank you.
Have a James. Wait, now that they own the rights to James Bond, wait for the Money Penny TV show. Wait for the Blofeld show. Wait for the Scaramanga show. Everything they can do that they can milk out of that cow without actually having to get away with putting another Bond in, because obviously the Broccolis probably won't let them get away with putting.
You know what's going to be the first thing? It's going to be young Bond. It's going to be young Bond.
I actually feel like no, because I feel like, again, Bond, the actual Bond might be the cash cow, the sacred cow that they maybe won't get away with touching. Where, they can make no one asked for a Clarice show, by the way, no matter how good it is.
That is true.
So whether or not it's a young James Bond, or whether it's, like I said, a Blofeld show, a Money Penny show, a show about Q, a show about M, they're doing a spin-off. Something that they can do, they can actually brand it, the James Bond Chronicles, the stories of Blofeld or something like.
This is the shared James Bond universe.
That's fucking what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, Dark City is by no means held in the same esteem as something like Bond or 101 Dalmatians or anything of that nature. It's an obscure little science fiction film from the 90s that I absolutely agree with you is a brilliant film. And absolutely, if you haven't seen it, I'm 100% on board with my co-host here. You should absolutely see it.
It's on Netflix.
But I don't want it. It's perfect the way it is. It should not be touched. And I don't need a backstory to the strangers. I don't need a backstory to what they're doing. That's because they'll ruin it. I don't need to know everything.
While I say I would love it, I don't need it. That I absolutely agree with you, Travis. This movie tells just enough rhyme and reason for every single character that it gets through, and it tells the story, and it doesn't stick around. I mean, it's an hour and 40 minutes.
This is one of my main complaints with cinema today is that people like Snyder and Nolan and people, and we're going to make a soapbox about them again, but they spend far too much time. They're far too indulgent. Where if this film gets in, does a thing, and gets out, and it's such a shame that Proyas never wanted to do anything because his two opening films of The Crow and Dark City is two films. I think maybe not his first two, but feature films. I think they might be. They're close to it anyway. That's a hell of a way to start. And then you're right. iRobot was pretty good. And that was his fourth. Yeah. But
then since then, it seems like he's not found any source material that's particularly gelled with him because, like Dark City, The Crow is so perfectly timed. It is a slice of this universe where it's like, okay, there is occasionally a crow will bring back to avenge. That's all we need to explain it. Cool, done, dusted. He is an avenging angel going around killing all these bad guys in a hyper stylized world. Cool. And
when you consider what was going on with superhero films at that point in time, this is a couple of years before Batman and Robin. Then that is a comic book character. So he 100% got that right. And he did, and so he backs it up with Dark City to prove it's not a fluke. That it's you're I mean, like, I didn't hate Gods of Egypt as much as everybody else did. Like, I thought it wasn't the most tragic film I've ever seen. Like, I would take it over something like Army of the Dead. I absolutely would.
I'd agree with that.
But it's not good. It's really not good.
It is entirely devoid of character. Whereas this Dark City and The Crow have ooze character, ooze story. In both of these movies, you just look at them and you just go, oh, there is so much potential for more, because that is good narrative storytelling where they are giving enough that you kind of go, okay, that's cool. I want to know more, but I know enough to keep the story going. That's the balance that you play, and he does it very, very well. Very well. Whereas Gods of Egypt, it's vapid. It's not bad, but it's just there's nothing interesting going on.
It's pretty bad, but I mean, it's certainly a whitewashing a lot of Egyptian people. Probably wasn't a good move either. But the guy can write, he can direct. His film even survived the influence of David S. Goya. So that in itself is advertisement for his abilities as a filmmaker. But he doesn't seem to be doing a lot anymore. His last few films have been short films, and Gods of Egypt was 5 years ago, and I don't imagine producers are backing up trucks full of money to do stuff after that. But maybe he's got enough money now. I don't know.
He's just the director for hire now, maybe.
Maybe he should go back to music videos. Do they still make music videos?
Yeah, they do.
It's a good call.
Let's move on.
Pivot to something else completely different. So I had a bit of a flashback weekend this weekend. If you don't mind, I'll do them back to back so we can go boom and flash them back, because I have absolutely nothing in common.
I don't know what you're talking about. They are part of the shared cinematic universe known as Hollywood.
You actually asked me. So the first film I watched, one of the films I watched this weekend was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is the first time I've seen this film.
Really?
I never saw this film when it came out because it just didn't look like it was for me. So this is from 2005, and you actually said which one is it? Because there were a few films called Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But this one, of course, is famous for starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Were they maybe together at the time? I can't really remember.
This was the movie that, depending on timelines and who you talk to, was the one that broke up Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, and he got with Angelina Jolie. There was a lot of hubbub around it.
So very gossipy sort of celebrity gossip. But of course, they were super, super hot at the time.
Yeah.
Brad still is. Angelina, not so much.
Well, she's going to be in the Eternals.
Angelina, not so much.
Fire hydrant on Isle Travis.
She's going to be in their first flop. Not to say, but she's actually. Have you seen any of the films she's directed? She's a decent director. Decent. She's not, Frank Capra or anything. But anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, 2005. A bored married couple is surprised to learn that they are both assassins hired by competing agencies to kill each other. Pretty straightforward. Directed by Doug Liman, probably best known for his work doing the Bourne films, Shaky Cam, Mr. Shaky Cam. He did two, didn't he?
No, it was Paul Greengrass who did Bourne Supremacy, Bourne Ultimatum, and then Jason Bourne, the fourth one of the true Bourne saga. And then there was another one that had Jeremy Renner in it, which was the Bourne Legacy. Doug Liman did Bourne Identity. He did Jumper.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You are. Edge of Tomorrow, which is
Edge of Tomorrow. Yeah.
Geez, that's a fucking good film.
Yes. It is.
And he did Chaos Walking. Ugh.
He's a bit of a director for hire, but he's overall a pretty solid director.
It's written by Simon Kinberg, who is now a director. Started out as a writer. He wrote X-Men Last Stand. He wrote this. He wrote Jumper. You mentioned Sherlock Holmes, Days of Future Past, Fantastic Four.
He is the true definition of failing upwards.
He did, because then he directed Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, I think.
Phoenix,
the last of the Fox X-Men films. The last X-Men film for a little while, it looks like, for now. But hey, look, some of those are okay. Sherlock Holmes is all right as a film.
Yeah.
And some of it, Days of Future Past, is a good film. So he hasn't done everything, but he wrote Fantastic Four. The fact he was ever hired again for anything, but I guess that means that Josh Trank kind of got the blame potentially.
Yeah.
But so this is so I had this film suggested to me by someone who said that they felt my characterization of it. I kind of thought this film was going to be a big, dumb, stupid action movie. And their feeling was that that's not what this is, and this is actually a metaphor. This film is about marriage and relationships.
Okay.
Which, to a degree, I believe it is. I mean, there are certainly early on, and there are occasional directorial flourishes from Doug Liman, where just in the way shots are framed, especially with shots between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, where he has things separating, a bit other sides of a room, or there'll be something separating the whole time, especially early on. We meet them as they've been married for a little while. We see them early on in their sort of, the honeymoon phase of a relationship. And then we see them as, bored, detached individuals from each other later on, as we set up into, the idea of them being assassins. And that's done reasonably well. You can sort of see what the director's going for there. But I would contend the film does turn into a big, dumb, stupid action film in the third act. So, I mean, the plot basically says it all. We see them going off doing their job as hitmen, assassins, what do you want to call it, hit people, assassins. And then at one point in time, they both end up accepting a job to assassinate the same person. And they basically get each other's way and basically cost each other the kill, if you will, the target gets
Contract.
away.
Yep.
Contract gets away, and then there's a fairly nice little sequence where they both, like he knows that she knows that he knows, and she knows that he knows that she knows, but they're not saying it. And then it kind of explodes into the stuff you saw in the trailers. I remember seeing the trailers going, really? And then basically, I mean, you don't really get it. Like getting guns, they got guns hidden over the house because it's like a James Bondy kind of house with like hidden drawers, and they're like shooting at each other. And I'm like, but you never really feel like they're actually trying to kill each other. And maybe this is further to the idea of it being a metaphor for marriage in the sense that you are throwing barbs at your partner. In this case, you're shooting your partner, but you're not literally shooting them. You're shooting them with words and actions and that kind of thing. If you were to take it down that path. And, while you might say horrible things to your partner, or your wife or husband or whatever, you're not necessarily trying to kill them. You're just trying to hurt them. And, and maybe I'm giving this script and film too much credit for trying to speak in metaphors. But I guess that kind of, for me, that wasn't very exciting because the stars of a film, right? They're not going to kill each other. You're not going to kill Brad Pitt halfway through a film. His film is not that interesting. If you're not that brave, this is a studio film, and your big stars are going to be there at the end. We all know how it's going to end before it ends. Well, at the start, you know how it's going to end. Yeah. But so I don't know. Maybe some people were thrilled by scenes of them like blowing the house up, and in a sense, not literally, but like blowing giant holes in the house and shooting shotguns. And the fight scenes were well choreographed. It was nice that what was interesting, we observed while watching it that Angelina Jolie is very much the aggressor in the fights, and that Brad Pitt is constantly on the defensive, and that this was maybe a conscious choice by the director to go, look, I don't want to look like it's a bad look to have Brad Pitt beating the shit out of Angelina Jolie on film, which is probably he's a lot bigger, I would imagine. I don't know, than physically, so maybe he would. I don't know. But that was, and then in the beginning of the third act where they actually team up and have to take their play. But now is a massive contract out. All the assassins are out to kill them. And the finale takes place in a Bunnings type store, like I don't know, Home Depot, I guess, if you're an American. Where it was like outdoor sets. And I think again that was a conscious choice, and maybe it was doing it for laughs. That this is somewhere where as a couple you might normally find younger couples sort of wandering around a place like that, and
this would look great in the living room.
Yeah, like an IKEA. It's like an IKEA meets a Bunnings, I think, is supposed to be what it was. And it's something sort of a coupley kind of thing, except that they're in this store trying to fight off waves of assassins. And again, I was thinking way too hard about this, going, apparently there are no cops in this city.
Nope.
Because these guys can have a gunfight in their house for 20 minutes and no one cops turn up. And then you can have a massive shootout. You have machine guns and shit in an IKEA essentially. And there's again no police just turn up, and I'm like, I kind of needed a little bit of an explanation about why that was. So I feel like I'm sticking the boots into it a little hard here. It was distracting. It was fine if you like that kind of thing. Action comedy. It was pretty much by the numbers for me, and I've never been a massive fan of. I mean, I like Angelina's some of work. I mean, I really like Girl Interrupted, but most of her studio stuff when she's not really pushing the envelope very hard, I don't know. It was fine, I guess.
I like the concept of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The idea of just that comedy of errors kind of thing, where two rival assassins, unbeknownst to each other, fall in love and have a family or have a relationship. I like that as a setup. I don't know if a movie, a big budget, big star movie, is the right vehicle if they want to actively try and use it as a metaphor for marriage and relationships. I think it kind of gets bogged down too much with, well, everyone loves Brad, everyone loves Angelina. We can't kill either one of them off. We need to make this lighthearted and fun. It's like, okay, but I thought you were making a metaphor about relationships and marriage and things like that. And aren't messages usually supposed to be poignant in some point? And it takes a very, very deft hand to make a poignant comedy. And Doug Liman is not that. This movie is not that. So it's like, okay.
And maybe that's what people didn't want to see. I don't know. I think it was fairly successful, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, I think so.
I recall it being fairly successful. And people, it's a worldwide gross of $487 million on a $110 million budget. Generally speaking, I think those numbers would tell you it's a reasonable success.
Yeah.
It was fine. It was fine. It didn't do much for me. But it's just not really a kind of film that I would. Not a film made for me. I would
it's
like
not for the curmudgeon.
For the curmudgeon, no. I guess it depends. I don't know. To put my finger on it, it was just so bland.
That's fair.
And white, and it was a very white film, right?
Oh my goodness!
This is the mayonnaise of.
I don't know
comedies.
what you're talking about. Keith David is in it.
His voice is in it. I think. I don't know if he's actually ever on screen.
He just goes by the name Father.
I didn't notice him in it anyway, but this is the film for people who find garlic aioli too spicy.
Hey, and there's an actor called Miguel in it, so
Oh, it's diversity.
Yeah.
You think the audience gets confused about me complaining about clumsy woke films trying to cram in their social messaging in an artless manner at the same time as complaining that this film is for people who find mayonnaise spicy? Got to keep them on their toes. While we're talking about films that white people like, I'm going to segue to another very white film, and that is The Breakfast Club from 1985, which I watched on Saturday night as well.
A legitimate classic.
A legitimate classic, and a film I had never seen.
Wow.
I must admit, I'm fairly poorly educated in the oeuvre of John Hughes. I mean, I've seen Home Alone and Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, but I think that might. Oh, and Weird Science. I'm pretty sure I saw Weird Science
You've
back
not seen Uncle Buck?
Oh, I have seen Uncle Buck. Yes,
there you go.
His 80s stuff. His 80s high school movies. 16 Candles. I've seen Ferris Bueller, but I haven't seen 16 Candles. I haven't seen this. What was the other one? Molly Ringwald was in. I can't remember, but
shit. What was that?
I can't remember, but certainly this and 16 Candles, which I know are some of his more famous films.
Yeah.
I had not seen before, so you probably have seen more stuff than I thought I had, but maybe those are his first two films, 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. So they were, I guess, the ones that he's often very famous for. I'd never saw, especially for the Brat Pack films.
Yeah. Those were the movies that kind of took up the moniker of Brat Pack movies.
If you're like me and you've never seen The Breakfast Club, you've probably heard about it endlessly. 5 high school students meet in Saturday morning detention, discover that they have a lot more in common than they thought, which is, again, like most of these things, a very brief overview of a film.
That really dates it. I don't know if it's the same in the US still, but the idea of teachers coming in for detention on the weekend, I don't see any English teacher ever going, yeah, I'll do that.
I was wondering about that because I don't believe I never had detention. But
goody two shoes.
I don't believe there was ever such a thing in Australia as Saturday detention.
Yeah.
And again, like you, I was sort of thinking, most of the teachers I knew were not the kind of people who like to come in on Saturdays, and the kind of teachers you and I know are not the kind of people who come in on Saturdays.
And I don't know if I would trust a teacher that would willingly go, yeah, okay, I want to come in on Saturday and hang out with the kids.
Yeah, like most of the teachers you and I know would come in and be like hungover or something and be like have a cold compress on their head and be like, just fucking shut up and get me a Barocca. Anyway, maybe it's an American thing. I don't know. If you're an American and you're watching your show, apparently there are 3,000 subscribers now. So if you're one of them and you know, but do they still do Saturday Detention in the United States? Did they ever do Saturday Detention in the States, or was it just in the movies? Tell us, get back in touch with us and tell us we're wrong, or let us know. We don't know, but that was certainly a cultural quirk that I didn't quite get, but I know what supposedly happened. We have Emilio Estevez in this film, starring as Andrew Clark. We have Anthony Michael Hall as Brian. We have the great Judd Nelson as John Bender, Molly Ringwald as Claire, and Ali Sheedy plays Allison. We only have a real people in these films who have sort of lines of note. We have Paul Gleason playing Richard Vernon, who is the principal, I think, who's supervising detention on that day. And John Kapelos plays Carl, the janitor, who, how crazy is this? They had Rick Moranis lined up to do that role. Rick Moranis had signed on to play the janitor, and they didn't like what he was going to do with it, so they fucked him off and got this guy in.
Oh my goodness.
Rick fucking Moranis, and they said no to him. They said, we don't like it. We'll get some. John Campbell, very familiar.
In case anyone who is new to the show doesn't know, I think Rick Moranis sits up there in a very rare little bubble, upper echelon of actors that we just love, like Sam Rockwell. You know, there are certain actors up there that we just love, and Rick Moranis is one of them.
Everyone loved Rick Moranis. He quit acting to go look after his wife. I mean, and you look at what his work in the 80s is. It's 80s and 90s, Spaceballs and Ghostbusters and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, these films just get funnier if they get older, especially Spaceballs. You know, what a funny movie that is all these years later. Merchandising.
I'll talk a little bit about Spaceballs later.
Not supposed to be an instruction manual. But we have these kids. We have a very antagonistic relationship between most of them, and that they don't know each other. They're friends. We have Emilio Estevez, who's the sporto, the wrestler. We have Brian, who's the nerd. We have John, who's the bad boy. Claire is the cute, sort of preppy girl, popular girl, and Allison is kind of the weirdo goth chick. It's not really gothy, but maybe 80s gothy. And initially, John is kind of the antagonist in the group. And he's stirring up Andrew and Claire and trying to get a rise out of him. At the same time, he's really pissing off the principal, Richard Vernon, and just being a complete cunt.
Apparently, he stayed in character offset as well, bullying the actors and stuff as well to try and just be the character. Nearly got fired for it as well, apparently.
I've heard that. You want to look at somebody who time hasn't been kind to? Look at what Judd Nelson looks like now compared to what he looked like in 1985. That is, he has a face that's been ridden hard and put away wet. It's not a good face anymore. He is
what a descriptor.
He's still working though. He's still working. But as the day sort of goes on, these conflicts, I guess, start to really draw things out in people, and we start to learn about why they're there. And each of them, in different times in the film, we learn about why they're in detention. From that, we start to learn about their backgrounds, their lives, why they are the way they are. Why is John such an asshole? What is it about his home life that puts him there? And we learn, I think I can spoil parts of a 40-year-old film, 36-year-old film. And he is basically abused at home by his father. And he basically, there's a scene where he goes toe-to-toe with the principal going, he's like, you want another detention because you got one more? And he's basically egging on the principal to keep giving him as many detentions as he can. Yeah. But basically, he's doing that in a way because he'd rather be in detention at school than be at home with an abusive dad. And what a wonderful little story this is from John Hughes, who wrote and directed this. Yeah. In a couple of days, apparently. That's a an angle. Like you think about the 80s, right? High school movies were a staple of the 80s. Bullies in high school movies were a staple of 80s films. But to so elegantly and give a bully a humanity and depth and make them an empathetic character in a way. No one was doing that. No one was doing that. I don't think they're doing that now.
No.
It's so easy to just go, he's an asshole. We want to see him go, arrested or custard pied, or the girl to dump him, or whatever it is. The nerds to beat him in the ski contest and save the community center. Like, I mean, whatever, right? He doesn't. John Hughes does not stoop to that level.
No,
these are human characters. These are characters with 360 degrees. They have emotions, they have stories, they have personalities. It's and he does it all beautifully and gracefully in an hour and 37 minutes. Zack Snyder. You had another hour on top of this, and you didn't create one character. And that's a zombie film, but it's he really gets some wonderful performances out of his actors. And everyone just sort of really occupies their character really well. There are a few parts of this where you're like, oh, that's not okay anymore.
Yeah.
Really not okay. Like there's a scene where he basically upskirts Molly Ringwald's character. Molly Ringwald's character is upskirted by the camera.
Yep.
That is actually Molly Ringwald's underwear. Yep. And she was like 16.
Yep.
At the time. So you're like, okay, we'll put that shot in the film. That's probably not too bad because it is from the perspective of John Bender, who is looking up her skirt. And that's the kind of dick move he might. And I'm not necessarily opposed to showing somebody being a dick like that to women, because we could then be a starting off point for like, why that's a fucked up thing to do.
Yeah.
The film doesn't do that.
No.
But also the fact that there are many ways you can achieve that shot without actually doing that to a teenage girl. So that was awkward. There is a section where John Benner's character is taken out of a library from where he's with the other students and put into a room by himself, where basically the principal threatens to beat the shit out of him.
That's good teaching.
Dares him to punch him in the face. You're like, that's not okay. Yeah. So it does show when there's scenes where they're all smoking weed in the library.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It was a bit out there for me, but like, it doesn't seem like something would really happen.
Yeah.
But fair enough. It's the 80s. I wasn't there.
It was the weekend.
But I enjoyed this film. I feel like I would have enjoyed this more if I saw this when I was a teenager. I can very easily see why people are like, oh, I'm a Claire, I'm an Allison, I associated with a Brian, or I wanted to be a John. The person who suggested this film for me to watch, who also is the same person who suggested Mrs. Smith, may or may not have had a childhood crush on Judd Nelson's character. This is how we discovered what he looked like, because I looked him up on Cameo, and you can get a shout out from Judd Nelson on the Cameo, and you're like, oof. I reckon if you got a cameo from him and you didn't know it was Judd Nelson, you wouldn't know. You have to be announcing, hi, I'm Judd Nelson. You may recognize from me from such teen films as.
I think that something like Breakfast Club is when you watch it, you do kind of understand why it was quite an influential movie to a writer such as Kevin Smith, and particularly what people were saying when Clerks and particularly his early movies came out, where people go, wow, he actually writes how people talk. There's that kind of familiarity with the characters, with all of the characters in Breakfast Club, that people of that age going to the movies and seeing them being quite honestly, I mean, caricatured to a certain degree, but quite honestly put on screen. That's a fairly novel idea that doesn't happen all the time. It's usually these hyper realized, hyper accentuated characters that are just mild kind of, oh yeah, I'm like, no one goes in and sort of like, oh yeah, I'm such a Black Panther, or I'm such a Captain America, or things like that. It's like, okay, yeah, there's not really.
That's a wonderful point, actually. Like you're right. While Marvel films are so ubiquitous now, we have a whole generation of kids like who've grown up on these films. Like, Marvel films have existed their whole lives if you're a teenager.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like we aren't making stories, at least in the cinema, we aren't making stories about them.
Yeah.
And I mean M because like I'm an old bastard, it doesn't matter anymore. But like, as a
different generation.
As a teenager, right? You could, in the 80s, could go to a movie and see a movie about people like you.
Mm-hmm.
As a teenager, for me, I mean, well, if you're an American at least, American Pie came out when I was in my early 20s, right? So for maybe kids a bit younger than me, you could go and see a film like that, which is a different kind of, more like in the Porky's tradition than in the Breakfast Club tradition, but nevertheless, a story about teens like us, kid people. They very rarely do not make films about people like us, or teenagers as you as a kid. And you can't go to the cinema and see a film and go, you're right. Like I'm a Claire, I'm a Brian. You're not gonna say I'm a Loki. Some might.
Yeah, but I mean, just finishing off that point, there was a lot of discussion and conversation, particularly when Black Panther came out, because it was such a prominent representation of a black character, a black hero character in cinema, and it was great to hear those stories. It's like, it's so good to be able to see that. And there was a little bit of that when Captain Marvel came out, but it's like, okay, it should be a better movie if you're going to be trying to kind of raise that flag with it. I think Wonder Woman might have been a better flag to kind of lift that with, just on a film critique level. But it's becoming more and more of a rare thing where it is actually relatable, even if it is an outlandish scenario. The characters being relatable seems to be a rare thing.
It's gone. It's gone the wayside. The teen movie's gone by the wayside.
Yeah, kind of.
The high school movie is kind of gone by the wayside. Maybe it's because there are TV shows being made on Netflix that do this for you young people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, they're probably not going to appeal to me, but I think I absolutely would agree that this is a timeless classic. And the fact that I still enjoyed it, and you like these people. They're wonderful characters. And that's that part of my life is so far behind me now. So I think it goes to show what a quality film it was, and what a great writer and director John Hughes was.
Yeah, absolutely. It's usually a good measure of the success of a movie when it is lampooned and homaged so much. Like, Don't You Forget About Me is
the whole scene of you walking away with it's in the air.
That's fucking iconic. And any time that song comes on, I instantly think of Breakfast Club.
I think I will now. I will now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently that was improv. So.
Okay. Cool.
I enjoyed it very much. So that was my weekend delving into the deep dark past of old movies, because they ain't making many good ones anymore in new films anymore. At least
they're a rare commodity.
Not until Black Widow comes out anyway.
Yeah. Well, now speaking of movies that have been lampooned, lambasted, and copied a lot, I decided to watch the 1980s cult classic Battle from Beyond the Stars, which, boiling it right down, I don't even need to look at IMDb for this, is Battle from Beyond the Stars is 7 samurai in space. And it is visually, think like the early Star Trek movies, the really early Star Trek movies, crossed with a bit of Flash Gordon movie, and you're in the right kind of thematic ideology. And with all of that, you get a lot of the stereotypes coming through. Not a single Black or Asian or even remotely European looking person. They are all very white, very, 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 very Western, and they, oh God, it's so ridiculously sexist. It's beyond a joke. Like, there are 2 women characters in it. One of them is kind of the science nerd, but she only really has like 3 key elements. So to sum it up for those who don't know the story of Seven Samurai, Battle from Beyond the Stars, there is I will need to actually look up the names of them because I'm not gonna.
Well, we got Richard Thomas playing Shad.
Yes.
We have the great Robert Vaughn playing Gelt. Robert Vaughn, for those who don't recognize the name, you look at his face, he's been in all sorts of different things. My personal favorite as Ross Webster in Superman 3.
Oh my God.
He was also in Towering Inferno, which is a classic movie from the 70s. George Papada's Cowboy. He was again, you're going to go, who's that?
Just watch the A-Team.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, the A-Team. Howard West was one. Very, very famous actor of his day. Sybil Danning was another name in there. It was kind of big in her day. Sort of, they're like a lot of washed up people who were desperate for a gig without actually being anyone super famous. I always took this to be a sort of a Star Wars knockoff.
It was. It does reek of that sort of like trying to quickly ride on the coattails of the success of Star Wars, because Star Wars had come out the year before. Or was it 78 or 79 for the original Star Wars?
77, wasn't it?
77, yeah. And so there was a slew of them. You can just Google IMDb and Google sci-fi late 70s, early 80s, and there's just so much of it. It's ridiculous. This has a little bit more merit to it because it is retelling a classic story.
Well, I mean, Star Wars was telling that story as well, right? I mean, we all know that George Lucas was very heavily influenced. A couple of years ago when we watched The Seven Samurai, we noted that what a massive influence it was on Star Wars. And, Lucas never disguised his love of Kurosawa.
Yeah, but this is far more obvious about it. It is just a retelling of Star Wars, kind of like how you get like the modern day, so like, oh, we're going to redo a Shakespeare movie, but with vampires and werewolves and things like that. It's like, try being a little bit more unique with it, but never mind. Shad, a young farmer, assembles a band of diverse mercenaries in outer space to defend his peaceful planet from the evil tyrant Sador and his armada of aggressors. Among the mercenaries are Space Cowboy, a space-going truck driver from Earth, Gelt, a wealthy but experienced assassin looking for a place to hide, and Saint Exim, a Valkyrie warrior looking to prove herself in battle. That is it. And this movie, it's an hour and 44 minutes. It kind of should have been longer, the way that they were telling it. But at the same time, it's like, oh God, you're really not doing anything at the same time. But it's a lot of really early days space battles action. Like they film the space battles in the same way that they would film an old school aerial kind of British jets versus German fighters, the RAF versus the Luftwaffe, and those quick kind of moments where you never really see them get to chase each other or anything like that, because it was all model work, and the model work is actually pretty good. Although the ship that Shad uses with the computer, the sentient computer called Nell, it from the front, the whole ship kind of looks like a weird snail. But when it's coming from the front, it just looks like a weird depiction of the fallopian tubes going into a womb. I don't know if that's intentional. I kind of hope not. But it's kind of tragically bad. It's not a good movie. I feel like the idea of it is ripe for remake, because remaking something that is a beloved movie of Seven Samurai and putting a modern day spin on it is popular. It's kind of guaranteed minimum budget sort of thing.
It was done again recently with the first season of the Mandalorian. They did an episode that was basically a remake of Seven Samurai. So if you liked it, I mean, it was only a half-hour episode, so it's not quite what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film was directed, at least uncredited, by Roger Corman, the great Roger Corman.
Yep.
If you are not familiar with Roger Corman, he's like the low-budget schlock film king, famous for never making a flop because he makes films for nothing.
Yep.
And actually being a guy who actually launched, he's still alive, by the way.
Yep.
In 95, he's still alive. But he has launched a number of careers.
Mm-hmm.
Among those, he mentored Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Jack Nicholson, James Cameron, Robert De Niro, Peter Bogdanovich, Joe Dante, and Sandra Bullock.
So one or two names you might know.
Two names you might have heard of one or two of those guys. So, I mean, he makes Drek.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of guys, you start somewhere, right?
Yeah, he recognizes talent.
And, you know, when they wanted to make, I forget which one it was. I think it was the Fantastic Four movie back in the 90s when they wanted to.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar, occasionally if a studio buys or writes something, George hinted at this before with some of her rights with Thomas Harris and his novel. You need to make a film based on that novel within a certain time period, or else the rights revert back to the original owner, and they get to keep the money, and they can sell the rights to somebody else.
Yep.
So the Fox had the rights to Fantastic Four in the 90s. I don't forget exactly which year it was. It was in the early 90s, like 80s. And they needed to make a film in a certain, and actually, you know, have it come out within a certain period of time, or else the rights would be gone. They didn't want to make a film at that point in time. So they got Roger Corman in, gave him $500,000 or something, and said, make us a film. And he made this god-awful Fantastic Four movie, which I think you can watch on YouTube now.
It's on YouTube. Yep.
And, you know, it did it in like 2 months, and it came out. And so obviously, it
was enough to qualify for the rights.
So, I mean, they played it at like one cinema for a week or something. It's like, oh, well, we made a film, we released it, and no one went and saw it. It's not our fault. You know, you never said it had to be a good film. And the Fantastic, in 1994 it was. And it's that's the kind of guy he was. He made it for nothing, and he's the guy who can come in and do that. Famous for that kind of thing. And quite often you'll find he's in a situation a bit like this where he's not actually credited as the director of a film.
Yeah.
But he might have been brought in to fix it, get it across the line.
Just work it, yeah. One thing that is kind of interesting when you rewatch this movie, though, is music is by James Horner, who is famous.
An Academy Award winner.
Famous for working with Jim Cameron. And the music that he puts, there's a lot of it in this movie. My God, it's kind of, it feels almost constant that there's some musical score. But it's like, fuck, James Horner was amazing at what he did, because even the schlock that you're watching, and it's like B-movie or B-grade TV movie quality acting in many of the shots, and the direction of it and the pacing of it. It's all over the place, but the music just gives it this air of grandiose space opera that you kind of go, all right, I'm just going to keep watching because something's going to happen. So he was a fucking amazing composer, and it's a shame that he's passed on, but my God, what a legacy of work that he had continued. Even the stuff that he did for crap movies, I'm curious to check it out, because it's like I want to hear what bad James Horner sounds like, because so far I haven't heard it.
It's interesting to sort of follow on from a film like this, just names that you know you come across. Bill Paxton worked as a carpenter on the set because he was mates with James Cameron. Interesting. And apparently James Cameron and future Galen Hurd met on this production. You don't know who Galen Hurd is. He's his production partner, who they made a little film together called The Terminator 4 years after this. So what an interesting set that would have been.
Yeah.
James Cameron was on set making models as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense hearing that, because like the opening of this movie, okay, it is so familiar to anyone because it is the big ship coming towards the screen and going, and it keeps on going, and the mini just keeps going, and the detail of the mini is revealed, and it just keeps going, and then eventually, depending on what movie you get to, at the back it says, "We break for no one." And it is an iconic mini in space movement. Star Wars did it so much. This does it. Star Trek has done it. And of course, Spaceballs has done it. And there's so much about Spaceballs in this movie that they clearly kind of almost did like what Airplane did to what was the movie that they ripped off?
Oh, Zero Hour, I think it was.
Zero Hour, yes. And there's so much of it that kind of go, oh fuck yeah, this is wow, they did such a good job. Oh my god.
He's talking about James Horner. I know I talked about him in the podcast not so long ago. I forgot he was the composer on the film Krull.
Yeah.
And he also did Streets of Fire, which was the film that kicked off our chain movie.
The film that kicked it all off. Wow. And now if that isn't something to end chain movie on, I don't know what is. But no, that's all I have to really say on Battle Beyond the Stars.
What an interesting film to talk about.
Yeah, but it was just such a fascinating time to the hands that the fingers that were in this pie, and it's like, oh, if this, then maybe that, and it could have if it had more care and attention done, it could have spawned something quite amazing.
Well, last Friday, I was supposed to go and see a film called Life Force at a comedy film screening, which is, again, in that sort of genre. It was 1981 Life Force, and that was about space vampires or something. But again, I think all in the wake of the 85, sorry. So all in the wake of the space trend at Star Wars. So that one was directed by one Tobe Hooper. Which was interesting.
Goodness me.
But apparently it's awful, so that's been rescheduled for July because reasons. The unspecified virus of unknown origin, of course.
Yes.
Walking around Melbourne and stealing people's shoelaces. Anyway, but have you anything else this week, or are we?
No, should we end it there? I think
we can give people some time to get some blood running back into their butts, and for people at home who are listening on the podcast, thank you if you've made it this far. It's quite a remarkable effort.
Yeah, but just to give a rundown of the show, episode 115, we talked about Hannibal from 2001. Travis picked Sid and Nancy, following the Gary Oldman link there for our next week's chain movie. I touched on Clarice, the Stan TV show that is continuing on slow weekly pace. We went on to our British sponsors from, what year was it, Travis?
88.
1988. Okay. Then Travis talked about his Wayback Machine, The Hidden. I talked about Dark City. Then we talked about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Breakfast Club, and finishing up with Battle Beyond the Stars. I think next week we may be able to talk about the first episode of Loki.
The 9th, I think it's supposed to come out. So that's Wednesday out their time. So I think it'll be Thursday our time. So you have to wait a couple of weeks for that one. Unless they drop it earlier, something like that. But I don't like our chance.
But that has been our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us, as Travis said. Please remember to go over to twitch.tv/thefriedbrain. Make sure you give us a little subscribe there and follow us. You can go to youtube.com/armchairproducers, facebook.com/George Tarrant, facebook.com/ Fried Brain Productions, all of that stuff. Travis is Evil Trav on Twitter. I am the Fried Brain. Can you sense a theme with my connections there?
Branding matters.
Appreciate it. Branding matters, and you know, I'm just telling everyone what's inside my head. It's only fair. A vague disclaimer is no one's friend. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. Stay safe. Bye bye.